And now we're in Act 3. This is Act 3, Scene 1. And of course where we left off at the end of Act 2 was that the murder has taken place. The nobles have met. They have decided that Macbeth is going to be king. They have already gone to Scone to crown him. And we see Macduff outside the castle saying, I'm not having anything to do with that. Macduff doesn't like the smell of things here. And so now we go to Act 3. I want to remind you about how Freytag's pyramid works when we're talking about Shakespeare. And I think I've shown you this before. And we see it's like this. Act 1 is always here. This is exposition, and we saw in Act 1 that very exposition, even though that particular exposition was of a heightened level of plot and suspense. But this is where we found out who Macbeth is. Remember, even in that very first scene with the witches, we found out about the battle. We found out they're going to meet with Macbeth. We found out all kinds of things there. So this is where we learn all of those pieces of plot. Act 2 is building. This is rising action here. And this rising action includes the murder, and to the point where Macbeth is named king. So all of this is in heavy, heavy plot rising. Act 3 is always the turning point. Something is always going to happen in Act 3 that's going to change the outcome of the play. So you need to be watching for that. What is it that is the point of no return? What is it that makes this plot go from this way to this way? Some people call this the climax of the play, but there's a lot more to come in Act 4 in this play. But it is a point of no return. It is a shift, a change, and that's what you need to understand that's getting ready to happen in Act 3. So in the beginning of this scene, we see Banquo come in, and he is giving us a soliloquy, and so we're hearing him alone, and these are his thoughts. And he's addressing Macbeth in his thoughts. This would be an apostrophe. He's speaking to someone who is not there. And he says, thou hast it now. King, Cawdor, Glamis, all, as the weird women promised. And I fear thou playedst most foully for it. I don't even need to tell you what that means. Yet it was said it should not stand in thy posterity. In other words, they said that you're not going to stay. They didn't literally say, Macbeth, you're not going to get to stay king. But they did say, Macbeth, or Banquo, your children will be kings. So this is what he means. That Macbeth, they did say, probably, that your line is not going to stay. Because they said, mine will. But that myself should be the root and father of many kings. If there come truth from them, those witches, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine. In other words, they have all come true for Macbeth. So if they come true for Macbeth, that means they might come true for me. And if they do, why, by the verities on thee, Macbeth, made good, may they not be my oracles as well. An oracle, remember, from Greek tragedy, is something that tells the future. And set me up in hope. So we're seeing the beginning of this speech, he's laying out his suspicion of Macbeth. By the end of this speech, he's thinking, this could go well for me and for my family. Of course, yet again, watch where Macbeth comes in. He always comes in following something that has been said that's significant. No different in this case. Macbeth follows that speech. Here's our chief guest. So they're in Macbeth's home, which is now, of course, the castle of the king. And so when he says, here's our chief guest, that lets us know that Banquo, he's saying, this is our main guest. Here's our honored guest. Banquo is the honored guest at this particular feast. Lady Macbeth is with him, and she says, if he had been forgotten, it had been as a gap in our great feast and all thing unbecoming. He's so special to this particular event. Macbeth says, tonight we hold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence. Banquo, let your highness command upon me to the which my duties are with a most indissoluble tie forever knit. Now Macbeth starts asking him, are you going somewhere this afternoon, Banquo? Yes, I am. Well, how far are you going this afternoon? Well, I'm going as far as I can go till darkness and return. He says, don't miss the dinner tonight. Macbeth is telling Banquo, don't miss the dinner tonight. Banquo says, okay, my lord, I will not. Watch this word, bloody, is coming up. Macbeth is sort of laying back here. We hear our bloody cousins, those would be Malcolm and Donalbain, are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel patricide. So I hear that those two have fled. Remember, they put the suspicion on them of the deed since they fled. And it says, I hear that they're in England and in Ireland, and they're not confessing. They're not saying that they did this. But of that tomorrow, wherewithal we shall have cause of state, graven us jointly. So we'll see you later. Banquo, have a good ride, and we'll see you tonight. Is Flint's going with you? Banquo says yes. Yes, he is, as a matter of fact. Oh, well, have a good ride, Macbeth says. Every man a master of his own time until then. So he dismisses all of the entourage that's around the king at that point and says, everybody on your own until dinner time. I myself am going to just have some alone time. They all leave, only with one servant. And Macbeth says, I need to talk to you. Are those men waiting for me? Now, we don't know what men, but he's saying this in a hushed tone secretly to this servant, and the servant says, yes, they are. They're right outside the palace gate. Macbeth says, bring them to us. And notice that he says, bring them before us. He's now speaking in what's called the royal we, W-E, we. The royal we. Kings and queens never, once they become a king or queen, never again use first person singular, because they and their country are now one. And this is called the royal we, because only that one person, who is the king or the queen, is able to now speak in those terms. So when he says to us, he's not saying to me and to some other people with me. He means just to me, but he's speaking again in the royal we.